Thank you very much. You know, since finding out in April about this wonderful honor, I've been thinking about what to say tonight. So as you would expect, I sought advice from a few of my most trusted mentors. Both of them are here tonight. The first one told me, Mr. Venuti, dress up, show up, and shut up. The second one, Boucher, said, be brief, be sincere, and be seated. I usually listen to my mentors, but tonight I choose to ignore their advice because I have a lot to talk about. However, for those of you that have been around for a long time, don't worry, it's not going to be a wars night. And you know what I mean by that. Listen, there are just so many people that I want to be able to talk about and acknowledge tonight. I won't be able to get to all of them, but you all know who you are. I usually cry pretty easily at these kind of events, so I'm going to try to do my best to stay composed. About 14 years ago, right here in Orlando, I was honored with a Lifetime Achievement Award. And at the time, I had mixed emotions about accepting it because, you know, it was 14 years ago, I was less than 50 years old, and my view was that most people that get a Lifetime Achievement Award are either retired or dead. And I didn't want to be either, so I wasn't sure I wanted it. But I would tell you tonight, I have no mixed emotions. I am truly honored, I am humbled, and I'm extremely thankful for and I couldn't be happier. And I have to start by admitting that I never had a plan to make the IT Hall of Fame. And for those of you that know me, that's a little unusual because you know I have a plan for most things that I do. I tend to be pretty organized. I get up most days and I write a to-do list. Some days the list starts with write a to-do list. So I could cross something off and feel like I've accomplished something. This wasn't the case in this particular situation. When I started in the industry a long time ago, I didn't have any idea what IT stood for. There'll be some people in the room tonight that would suggest I still don't have any idea what IT stands for. I was 17 years old, as that video talked about. I was still a senior in high school. I had hair down to my ass. I had a girlfriend that I needed date money for. I had a 66 GTO with trips that idled at $1 a minute. And I had a half-baked plan to go to college. And so I needed a job. So it was all about getting a job for me. Where I grew up back then, the way you got a job was the old school way. There would be a guy who would know a guy who would know another guy, and you'd get a piece of paper with a number to call. And that was it. That's how it worked. And that was my first piece of luck because that number I was given a call was a parts distribution center for IBM. And the job was literally in the mailroom, as the video talked about. And I figured it wasn't too bad for a senior in high school to work, you know, for IBM. Now, I have to confess, though, at the time I had no clue what IBM did. I may have known they made typewriters, maybe I knew they made copiers, but I certainly didn't know the letters stood for International Business Machines, and they were the leading IT company on the planet. The letters could have stood for the International Banana Makers, for all I cared at the time. I needed a job. And the good news was I got the job, and I stayed there for more than 30 years, and I met a lot of people along the way that have been very instrumental in me being here. I'll talk about a few of them tonight. I was told about this happening by Todd in April. So I've had, obviously, a lot of time to think about what I wanted to say and, in general, my feelings about this honor. If I tried to pick one word, it wouldn't be proud, although I'm certainly that. It wouldn't be satisfied because I honestly believe that you can really never be satisfied. There's always more you can do. It would be thankful. And I have a lot to be thankful for. Let me start with thanking CompTIA and the Channel Company for making all of this possible. I do not think we in this room understand I don't think we understand how fortunate we are to be in an industry with a trade association like CompTIA and a media events and marketing services organization like the Channel Company. I know CompTIA pretty well. As Todd indicated, I served on the board for 2 terms, most recently for 6 years. Not only is it extremely well run by Todd and the team, but they're also doing an incredible job advancing the global IT industry with initiatives like cybersecurity, basic and advanced certifications, and the workforce initiatives. So my message to all of you that don't know what CompTIA does and don't understand it is get engaged and learn about it, because they are a huge part of our industry. Now, you all know the Channel Company and the value that they bring to each and all of us in the industry. But I honestly think they're incredibly underrated in terms of the good they do for our industry and honestly for all of us. They're consistently looking out for the best interests of the solution providers while ensuring that the vendors and the distributors get their messages out. And as part of all that, enhancing the brand of all you channel chiefs out there that I know I took advantage of during my time. They created the term channel chief. Now, if you told me when I was started with IBM years and years ago that I was going to be a channel chief, I would have thought you meant I was in charge of the television remote control. Think about that one for a minute. That one's better than you think. Took me a long time to think about that. They're also an incredibly well-run organization. Lisa, Dan, Burke, where is he? The energy is amazing. DeMarzo, Jen, Bill Jones, and the rest of the team just do a fabulous job. A shout out to Bill for the work that he does putting these things together. It's not easy to do it, and I appreciate that. And then, of course, their CEO, Bob Foletra, who's not only a good friend of mine, but I'm very proud to say now a Hall of Fame colleague, because Bob won't tell you this, but he was inducted 2 years ago into this same Hall of Fame. Well-deserved honor. I also want to thank my friend Marie Mioli-Rourke, who's sitting over there. She did an unbelievable job on that video, and I really appreciate the hard work she did. We must have talked, I don't know how many times, and it came out great, so thank you. Yes. As that video indicated, I mentioned the guy helping me get a job years ago. Well, that guy was my father. And he gave me that piece of paper. He died in 1980. And he was a truck driver, and pretty much his entire life. And while he wanted me to do well and be happy with whatever profession I chose, I'm pretty sure he didn't have a plan or think that there would ever be a chance that his son would get into the IT Hall of Fame. When I first got the job at IBM, the most concerning part of the job for me was that I had to wear a tie every day. And I did not know how to make a tie. And I was obviously too stylish to wear a clip-on. So what I would do is, my father worked literally right across the street from where we lived, and I would walk across the street every morning for about the first, I don't know how long, and he'd make my tie for me. Literally. So, yeah. So while I know he would be proud tonight, he would probably be thinking, I can't believe that dope that I had to make the tie for actually made any Hall of Fame. But it was the truth. He was a pretty laid-back guy, very friendly, very outgoing, but he had a tough streak that came out every now and then. And it came out about 3 years after I started with IBM. I had an uncle that ran a tuxedo rental shop. And it was in Somerville, Massachusetts, and I was 20 years old at the time, and they were looking for somebody to run the tuxedo rental shop. And my uncle asked me to run it. Well, I mean, if you grew up in the neighborhood I grew up in, and you got a chance to run the tuxedo rental shop in Somerville, that was kind of like something you had to really think about. Well, my father found out about it, and he made it clear in no uncertain terms that it wasn't going to happen. And for some strange reason, I listened to him, and I didn't do it. And he was right. And that was my second break, because the last time I looked, there was no Tuxedo Rental Hall of Fame. Right? Now, most times in speeches like this, people wait till the end to acknowledge their spouse and their family. But I don't want to do that, because you might pull me off the stage prior to then, and I'd never get to it. But the reason for me that it's really important is because, you see, every story I'll tell tonight, every person I'll acknowledge, and pretty much everything that's ever happened to me, my wife Jane was there for it. Because she would argue that my life actually started when I met her. There is some truth to that. It was certainly another break for me, but the truth is we met in February of 1971 at a teen center in East Cambridge, Massachusetts. I was 16, she was 15. We've been together ever since, married 40 years and together about 46 years. So many people ask me what the secret to our staying together this long is. And I can tell you it's date night. She goes Thursdays, I go Fridays. Now, that's not what it sounds like, because she goes to play golf with her friends and I play cards with my friends. At least I know I'm playing cards with my friends. But I can honestly tell you, and the reason I have to tell some jokes is because I would cry. But I can honestly tell you that whatever success that I've had, she's been right there alongside with me and was a major part of it. And I could not have done it without her. She knows that, tells me all the time. My daughter's also here tonight, and this is the first industry event she's ever attended. And for years, she really had no idea what we did. And after last night and today, it was probably a good thing that she had no idea what she did. So she did ask me this morning, I went by the pool and they were hanging out at the pool, and she said, "Dad, does anybody work here?" I said, well, what do you mean? She said, "Well, some of the people that you introduced me to last night were at the pool most of the day." So after questioning it for a little while, I figured it out was Lenny and Q that were at the pool. But let me just tell you about my daughter. I could not be more proud of her. She's kind, bright, poised, and a wonderful young lady. She pretty much decided at a very young age that she wanted to be a school teacher. And today she's a third grade school teacher in Atlanta. And yeah. And so while those of us that work in this industry get caught up, in what we do every day, she does something, in my opinion, that really matters and will have an enormous impact on the lives of hundreds, if not thousands, of young children. And that matters to me. Because I bet all of you can name at some point some teacher that had an impact in your life, right? And so that's important. You also have no idea what it's like to stand in the back of a classroom while your child is teaching class. It's an amazing feeling. Last September, for her birthday, I brought cupcakes to the class. And I sat in the back of the room. And I was standing back there and just kind of listening and paying attention, and everything was going well till one of the little children, little brats, came up and said, "Who's that guy in the back of the room?" And my daughter said, "Well, that's my father." And the kid said, "There's no way, Miss V, that your father could be that old." And I left, and I haven't been back since, but I'll be back. So there's also a few other people in this room tonight that I want to acknowledge and thank. The next is my first mentor and role model at IBM. That's Ross Venuti. I met Ross in 1977. Ross gave me my first sales job. I hate to tell you, it was selling inside sales, selling typewriter, ribbons, and type balls. That's how far back we're going. Ross is one of the finest, nicest human beings you'll ever meet. He's calm, he's genuine, he's just the nicest person there is. For years, about the worst I could get from him was good grief. Who says good grief? Nobody says good grief. But for me back then, he was a terrific role model when I needed one, because as you can see from those pictures, I was a little rough around the edges when I started. And I cannot tell you the number of times that I went to Ross for advice, and he never once failed to help me think something through. Ross had a very successful career at IBM, and he and I and our families remain best friends to this day. The next person I want to acknowledge is the opposite of all that. He's not calm. He could be nice and genuine, but those aren't the first thoughts that come to mind when you meet him. It's Dave Boucher. And for those of you that don't know, Dave Boucher, who's also a member of this Hall of Fame, was the original channel chief, right? And he was the model that many of us that worked in his organization at IBM learned a ton about managing the business and developing relationships, how to treat solution providers, how to treat distributors the right way. And we learned about integrity, we learned about trust, we learned about honesty, and we learned about loyalty, and about doing business the right way. And there's a ton of people in this industry today that were part of that organization. There's many of them sitting at this table and that table and that table who were part of that organization, and they know that. Dave's also the finest salesperson I've ever met, one of the best in the industry. Who else could have sold a channel on channel assembly for about 5 years? Bob referenced it. He was kind. There are a ton of Boucher stories that many of us have, but let me tell you the one that means the most to me. So I met Dave in September of 1986, the same week my daughter was born. I used to joke that I met 2 big babies in 1 week, but he didn't like it, so I stopped. At the time, he was the IBM channel chief, and he was the face of the channel. And I was just beginning, and I wanted to be a channel account manager. That's what I wanted to do. For some reason, I thought I would like it, and I was right. But anyway, after Jill was born, I got a bit homesick, and I got this crazy idea that I wanted to transfer back to Boston for a channel account manager job. And I went to see Dave, and I asked him if I could have the job. Now, you got to understand, I'd only met Dave. We were in Atlanta probably for 3 months, so he didn't have any real clue who I was or what I did. Talked to him for about 10 minutes. I told him why. I basically told him I was homesick, and he said, "You can have the job." He said, "But let me tell you something." He said, "If you go back, and you go back to Boston, you'll never leave again." He said, "So it might be the right thing for you to do, because there's nothing wrong with that, but think about whether that's the right thing from a career standpoint." So I asked him, I said, "Well, what would the alternative be?" So he laid out for me the next 3 to 4 years. And he said, "There's no guarantees, but if you do the following things and you perform, I'm going to fast track you through and give you a number of roles that will accelerate your career." So now I had something to think about. So he said, "Go home, take the weekend, and think about it." So I went home and I talked to Jane about it. And I said, "Well, what do you think?" She asked me the same question I was thinking, which was, "Can he do that?" And the answer was, I had no better idea, so I stayed. And 15 years later, after working for Dave, I would tell you I learned a valuable lesson that day. I learned that you be honest with people, you give them your word, you then do what you say you're going to do, and it'll work out. And that was an extremely valuable lesson that I learned, and a lot of the folks that were in the organization learned. So I retired from IBM in 2005, and I went to Juniper, and I lasted at Juniper for 7 years. And by then, I thought I was ready for anything, having been at IBM more than 30 years, and I would tell you I wasn't. So although I had the good fortune of working for people like Ross and Dave, I was joining at the time a relatively small Silicon Valley company that didn't operate anything like IBM operated. And there were 2 people there at the time who were instrumental in my making it through the first few years. Both were there when I got there. On paper, they worked in my organization, but we were really partners, and I learned from them. The first is Steve Pataki. Steve today is the global sales leader for SonicWall. Incredibly creative. Those of you that know Steve, bright, hardworking executive. At the time, he created the Juniper Channel program, which was the best in the industry, by far. The other individual is Donna Grosjean. Anybody that knows Donna knows that she's the smartest, most conscientious channel executive in the industry. She's also one of the few channel executives that left a very significant role for a distributor and then became really successful for working for a vendor. Donna created the Juniper distributor program, but was also involved in all other aspects of it. And today she runs global channel sales for Aruba and also SMB sales. So separately, Steve and Donna are pretty unique people and incredible talents, and have gone on to have great careers. But back then, working together, they were like magic. And it was amazing to watch them get stuff done, and they were truly the heart and soul of Juniper. And the reason I'm taking people through that is I get a lot of the credit for that period, when the truth is that if it wasn't for those two, I would not have made it out, and we certainly would not have been successful. So thank you. And like they tell me all the time, they didn't get enough credit at the time for everything that they did. So now you're getting it. So within the next year or two, however, the rest of the team came. And there are many of them are sitting here tonight, Blaine and Hojan and Derek and Michelle and David Bancamper, and it was truly, we formed it, what I think, and a lot of people talked about, was a channel dream team. And it was as good a team of channel executives as you'll ever find. And most of them have gone on to very significant roles. I can't acknowledge all of them, but you all know who you are. The Dell run after that was short by my standards. It was only 3 years, but it was sweet because I got to renew my relationship with my good friend Greg Davis and meet people like Cheryl Cook, David McIntyre, Bob Skelly, MC, Dina, folks that have really become good friends in a short, 3 or 4, 5-year time frame. And I also had the good fortune over the years of meeting some incredible people along the way and developing amazing friendships with people like Q and Stegner and Lenny, and you guys all know who you are. But it's a nice feeling to be able to attend an industry event like XChange or ChannelCon and hang out with true friends, in addition to knowing a vast majority of people in the room. Now, of course, there's a price you pay for that. I've lived in my current house in Georgia for about 8 years, and I could not pick one of my neighbors out of a crowd of one. But I wouldn't trade it. About 6 months ago, I decided to take the role as president and CEO of Computex. As many of the solution providers that I've worked with in the past know, I've always admired their role in solving customer problems and being in the forefront of service and support. I took the job because I wanted to stay involved in this industry, and I love this industry, and I wanted to continue to learn the business from a different side. And I'm doing that, and I'm having fun. I'm now working with another dream team because, as I kind of knew going in, the Computex organization is second to none, and the credit goes to Sam and Jason Hafer, who started the business more than 30 years ago. So over the years, I would tell you that I've tried to be helpful to people and occasionally mentor them if I could, because I believe that somewhere along the way, we all need some help, a pat in the back, some encouragement, or in some cases, a kick in the butt. And I've tried and will continue to try to mentor and help people in the industry because I had people like Ross and Dave and others help me. So if I had to sum up my philosophy as far as any success that I've had, I would sum it up as follows. Show up and work hard, get stuff done, treat people the right way, even be nice if it's possible, and develop relationships, and develop them by having integrity, being honest with people, and do what you say you're going to do. I'm going to close, and for me it was as simple as that. And I want to close with a quote that I heard recently from, of all people, a New York Yankee. And here I am standing up here with my Red Sox cufflinks on, talking about a New York Yankee. But it was a great quote. So a few months ago, they retired Derek Jeter's number at Yankee Stadium. And Derek Jeter said, "Time flies, memories fade, but friends and relationships last forever." I believe in that, and I could not have said it better, so thank you very much.